Welcome into the EMA Online Postgame Podcast. I'm Mason Voth, joined by Alec Bussey, as we get set to recap the Wildcats' performance against the Jayhawks on Saturday and also prepare for the Big 12 championship. First time K-State will be playing in the Big 12 championship game since 2003. They did win the Big 12 in 2012, much to the surprise of Tim Brando, who rumor has it claimed that K-State's last Big 12 championship was in 2003. So tough day for Tim Brando yesterday. He called Phillip Brooks Josh Brooks on his touchdown. I don't know who Josh Brooks is, but if you find him, just know that Tim Brando is looking for him. So not a great day for the broadcast crew that we knew would struggle yesterday. And other than that, K-State had their ups and downs in the game, and I think they were fortunate early on in some areas. But I will always say this because this is the Kansas angle that always plays into these games. I can remember if you go back to 2015, K-State ends up winning that game in just a monstrous blowout. And I had a KU person say to me, like, well, if you take this, and this away, like, it's actually a closer game than you think. And it's like, yeah, you're right. But you know why those things happen is because one team was good and one team was bad. And that's, KU's not bad anymore, but they made mistakes and they still have some characteristics of a bad team. And that is ultimately what ended up doing KU in yesterday is they're just not at the level yet to be able to compete for an entire 60 minutes of playing the cleanest of games. K-State is a team that yesterday really only made one true disastrous mistake, and that was a strip sack that Will Howard had, and they were able to rebound from it. So I think that's just the easiest way to sum up everything in the big picture. But overall, K-State finds a way to get the victory. It was your first Sunflower Showdown, Alec. What were the big takeaways? And at any point, did you think K-State was in danger yesterday?
I don't know if I thought K-State was in danger at any point. Certainly, it was a high-energy game with the fans heavily invested into it. They were pretty excited, really from the jump. I mean, the students were there early. They were chanting some profanities, which I've heard are something that doesn't make the K-State administration very happy.
Doesn't make some people very happy. Well, yes, you're right. The administration doesn't love it. Here, let me throw this out here real quick. I want to go on record with my opinion of the chant. I think it is the dumbest thing when K-State is playing, Charlotte to start the season, or if they're, in the middle of a game against, I don't know, Iowa State or something. But even though, like, it is vulgar, it's not great when you got a lot of kids in the crowd and everything. I am okay with the chant when they are facing KU because it's really going to be tough to do anything about it. And ultimately, like, you're just getting a bunch of hate out towards your rival. That's good, clean hate right there. Just deal with it then. And also, if you just quit making a big deal about it, it probably goes away. I think that's kind of the thing that we've seen this year is, Jerome Tang comes in. He did more to get rid of the chant than anybody else has ever done at K-State. And he was able to get them to go back to saying KSU during Wabash Cannonball. And it comes out during the KU game. Whatever. That's fine. That's to be expected. So I think as long as you turn a blind eye to it, it's only going to happen during the KU game. And ultimately, I'm not going to, clutch my pearls at that too terribly much because it is what it is. So the chant, that's my official stance on it.
Yeah, I don't really care. It doesn't bother me. I say the word. I hear the word said quite a bit. So the word doesn't bother me. I won't say it on here. But long story short, no, it was a pretty exciting game to be able to witness and be able to kind of see the energy inside Bill Center Family Stadium. It was really cool. Obviously, the fans were really invested, like we just kind of talked about, but also just like with everything on the line, I thought it added a little bit more juice to a rivalry that kind of has needed it, I guess you could say, over the last decade from both sides, just because K-State's dominated it so much. And with KU being more competitive this year, like that alone added more juice. And then to answer your other question, just about, if there was ever a point where I thought K-State could be in trouble, I said it last night in the 2-minute drill. I thought at the end of the first half and then going into halftime and then coming out of halftime, KU had a really good opportunity to kind of take control of the momentum of the game. They were down, obviously, at the half. I think they were down 10 or whatever it was. But if they would have scored on either of those two possessions they had right before the half, the one before the Will Howard fumble or the one after the Will Howard fumble, and then scored coming out of halftime, they could potentially take a lead. on K-State in the second half. And I think at that point, with everything K-State's playing for, maybe they get a little tight, maybe they tense up. Kind of similar to what you saw maybe a little bit yesterday in the Ohio State-Michigan game. For those of you guys who watched that, just like you could feel the tension that Ohio State was playing with in the second half. And I think you maybe see that if K-State got in that situation, but the defense stepped up and the defense made plays, and they didn't allow KU to really kind of build momentum on either of those two drives in the first half. And I think they got a 3-and-out coming out of halftime as well. So give credit to the defense on those 3 plays on those 2 drives, because I thought it was pretty impressive.
So yeah, I mean that's a good point. And you think about how K-State started. They get the ball to start. They didn't win the toss and take it. They lost the toss, but KU deferred. And like the nightmare scenario is a 3-and-out, and you have to give the ball to Kansas immediately. That was one of the things that I had focused on and talked about. Is I didn't think that you could give Kansas that kind of life early in the game, and they did. Fortunately enough, though, in wet conditions and a booming punt from Ty Zentner, Kansas ends up muffing the punt, and the Cats end up getting the ball at like the 5-yard line and immediately punch it in with Malik Knowles. And again, weather was bad, so that played a part in it. But again, that just goes into like Ty Zentner also played a significant role, because it was a big time punt. It sent the guy backwards, and with that, he slipped, couldn't hang on to the ball, and it set K-State up to where they had the lead and never had to worry too much about what the score and outcome would be from a trailing standpoint, because then Kansas got the ball and they answered, and the offense moved things really well. The only breather that K-State caught in the first 4 possessions of the game last night for KU was when KU, for whatever reason, tried to return a kick, which was a bad idea for them. They get backed up, and then they also get a penalty on it, so they're way back there, and they commit a holding penalty in the end zone for a safety. And so, I mean, right at the get-go, K-State's been spotted 9 points that they should not have had by KU, and that plays into the role of, yes, you can say K-State should not have had those points, but part of it is like good teams create that. And I thought the K-State pass rush that led to the hold in the end zone was probably one of the better plays that the defensive line had in the first half, because they struggled a little bit there. And then, like I mentioned on the Zentner thing, my whole point with that. So, it worked out for K-State, and then they buckled down from that point forward. They kind of turned it into a similar game to what they played against West Virginia, where in that West Virginia game, they got torched in the first half trying to kind of get their legs under them as a defense. And then they settled down, because in the second half, and really you can go back and throw in the 2 final drives before halftime. This is what the drives look like for KU. So they had 3 plays for 9 yards, 3 plays for 1 yard, 3 plays for 3 yards. Then they had 3 plays for 18 yards, but they fumbled it. And then when KU finally got the ball kind of moving again, it worked out really to K-State's benefit, because that was their 16-play drive that took almost 8.5 minutes off the clock. And when K-State has a double-digit lead, they're more than okay in a game that was starting to move really quick in terms of how choppy it was with possessions and not much time was going off the clock. K-State, I'm sure, was more than happy with KU taking that timeout. And then after that point, after the 16-play drive, KU went 3-and-out on all of those. So the K-State defense did eventually buckle down and find a way to get the job done. It just took some time, and I'll let you elaborate on what you saw there. And then I've actually got some numbers from the first half defense the last couple of weeks from K-State that I'd like to mention.
Yeah, I think in the pregame preview that I did of the game on Saturday, I wrote that I thought the game would be a little bit more competitive than it maybe has been in years past, just because KU's been better than K-State has been. And really, Mason, if you kind of look at the way the game flow was, I feel like that was kind of pretty spot on. You did a good job of evaluating what I thought were 2 pretty key situations with the muff punt and the safety. I mean, that spotted K-State 9 points. I mean, if you go into halftime without those 9 points, it's a tied game at 21-21. And then obviously it was pretty back and forth a little bit in the third quarter as well. I don't think there was very many points scored in the third quarter. I mean, only K-State had that 1 field goal. So, I mean, you're looking at, if you get rid of those 9 points and the game flow remains the exact same, again, that's 24-21 going into the fourth quarter. But again, like you said, like those plays happen, and K-State took advantage of the mistakes that KU made. And I thought in the fourth quarter, you just kind of saw the talent difference and really the advantages that K-State has right now over Kansas as a team, and maybe just even more so as a program, because Chris Kleiman's been able to build his program for 3-4 years. He's in his fourth season, where Lance Leipold's only in his second season, and considering when he got hired at Kansas, like this is kind of year one at Kansas. Last year, I think a lot of people kind of view it as like a year zero. So I mean, this is kind of like year one for Leipold at Kansas, and to see the talent difference in the fourth quarter, I think was pretty drastic. I mean, that's where you kind of saw K-State really inflict their will on running the ball. I mean, Deuce finishes with 147 rushing yards, but he didn't have a great first half. I mean, DJ Giddens gets a few carries in the second half, particularly in the fourth quarter, and he finishes the day with 9 carries and 44 yards. Like they imposed their will in the fourth quarter, and they wanted to do that. Kleiman said after the game that in the third or fourth quarter, they felt like they needed to just kind of take control physically of the game, and they did that. And I think that's kind of why you saw K-State, one, open up a 20-point lead by the end of the game, but also you saw them really kind of take control of the time of possession in the second half. I know Kansas won it overall 31-29, but I thought K-State did a really good job of possessing the ball, particularly in the fourth quarter. And if you take away that 8-minute drive that Kansas had in the third quarter and early into the fourth quarter, I think it might have been, I mean, K-State really dominated the second half of the game when it comes to time of possession, which I thought was going to be a huge key. I thought ball control and just possession was going to be a massive key. And it was, because that's kind of how K-State won the game late.
Yeah, I mean, you just think K-State ultimately has more of the playmakers right now, or guys that fit together to make plays. So it makes sense that if they're the ones that get to kind of wean the clock down, it's going to work out in their favor. K-State first half defense, the last 2 games, this is since Kobe Savage went out against Baylor. They are giving up 23.5 points per first half. So in total, that would be 47 that KU and West Virginia have put up the last 2 weeks. And the yardage is at 226 in the first half for the Wildcats. The note there is that they have really buckled down in the second half, where the scoring has been limited and the defense has made critical stops when they need to. So this defense is not bad right now without Kobe Savage and then also Sincere Mason, who follows. But I do think they are still finding their footing in these games, whereas when you have somebody like Kobe Savage that players have talked about how he's kind of one of the bigger voices on that defense and all the things that he does, I think it was a lot easier for them once they got into a game to kind of immediately understand what everybody needed to do and what the adjustments had to be in game, from just a player's perspective on what they needed to do and how they needed to work together. Whereas now it seems like this defense is needing to take a little bit more time and get into that second half, and then they can kind of have that reset at halftime, and they've learned how to play together and how to approach the specific team that's facing them. And they're just not going to have that opportunity to do that against TCU this weekend. So they're going to have to come out and make sure to kind of get things shored up pretty early on, because TCU has the talent and is obviously the best team in this league, and they're going to be able to go out there and try and put it on K-State early if they don't take advantage of it. So I think it's going to be interesting to see how K-State handles that. I thought we saw some strides from some guys yesterday. VJ Payne played pretty well. There were still some moments out there where you can tell he's a young guy, but he made plays and did a lot of the right things for K-State. So encouraging performance by some of the guys that are having to fill in defensively yesterday. I guess maybe the other thing is they only got 1 sack on Jalen Daniels yesterday. That's still one of those areas where the pass rush, I think it's there. They're doing some things that I like and are pretty good, but they're not actually finishing it with sacks. I mean, you go back the week prior, it was Brendan Mott that was the guy that really came away with, I think, the only sacks in that game. And it feels like they're getting a lot of pressure at times, but they're not actually finishing it. And that's something you're going to have to be careful with, because, again, Max Duggan's very good when he has to improvise, and he can beat you with his legs, as K-State has found out in years past. So I think finishing plays when you get that pressure is something to watch for this upcoming week. And I'll be interested to see if Joe Klanderman has anything different kind of drawn up to try and help K-State apply that pressure and finish.
Yeah, and we know, like you said pretty well there, like the challenge that the K-State defense has this week against TCU is pretty drastic. And if you saw anything last week, and I didn't get a chance to watch any of the TCU Iowa State game, but that offense seems to be clicking. Like, obviously, Quentin Johnson has been banged up a little bit. Kendre Miller's been banged up a little bit, but they both played, from what I understand, and they both played a little bit more in the last couple of weeks. Like, you put all that stuff together, and the offense seems to be clicking. And I honestly think TCU too, like, public perception at this point seems to kind of think they maybe locked themselves into the playoff because of the loss that Ohio State suffered to Michigan and just some other things that have happened in the college football world, like LSU losing to A&M last night. Like, you put those things together, and I think TCU fans and TCU um, players and coaches should feel really good about their opportunity to make the playoff, even if they lose to K-State. But, like, you don't want to put it up to the committee at that point, especially if you were to struggle and get beat by a couple scores. So, like, I'd imagine TCU is going to come into this game with a really effective game plan. They know what worked against K-State's defense in the second half. Granted, there was guys missing on the back end of that. Julius Brents missed plays. Josh Hayes missed plays. I believe Kobe Savage played the entirety of that game. But, all things considered, like, TCU's offense knows how to attack Big 12 defenses. They hung 62 on the Big 12's best or second best defense yesterday in Iowa State. So, like, that offense is going to be motivated. And really, that defense has started to play pretty well over the last couple of weeks. We saw what they did against Texas, not allowing an offensive touchdown until the very end, I think. Is that correct? I mean, I know they had that defensive touchdown. They allowed 1 or 0.
Yeah. It was 17-10 was the final score. So, yeah, they didn't allow an offensive touchdown in that game.
And obviously they did a great job shutting down Bijan, who's the best tailback in the country, potential first-round pick. Like, you put all those things together, and that defense is playing with some swagger now too. And it's going to be a really tough game for K-State, and they're going to have to come in prepared, and that's something that they really pride themselves on doing. But, yeah, I mean, the offense is going to have to put up points because at some point, TCU is going to score.
I think mentioning the defense and some of the struggles they had against TCU the first time around is important because we've seen the last couple of weeks, some of the guys in the secondary have missed plays that they need to step up and be able to make. And there were some breakdowns for K-State because actually, if you go back and look, like, I don't think that K-State played a terrible defensive game against TCU. The problem was they would have like 2 plays where they completely shut the Frogs down, but then they would give up the big play on like 3rd and 4 or whatever it was. And it wasn't just that TCU was getting a back-breaking first down. It was that they were getting the rest of the 55 yards that went with the field. And so they were going down and scoring on it. I think that's one of those things, if you go and look at some of Kendre Miller's runs in that game, it feels like he broke off some big ones and just big plays through the air. So K-State's going to have to step it up and probably come out and play the game that they played against Oklahoma State. Like, we know that Oklahoma State team was starting to trend down because of injuries and everything else, but K-State also played one of their better games there. I think it was the best game we've ever seen Echo Boydo play at K-State. And I think they're going to need something at that level where everybody kind of steps up, but still have the pieces to go and get it done. And there are things that the defense did that you would have liked to have seen them do a little bit better. But a lot of credit also needs to go to how Kansas played yesterday and some of the scheming that they had. I thought that was pretty creative on a lot of the things they did. They obviously had a plan that they could attack K-State by knowing that the Wildcats were going to load up and expect one thing, and then they had a couple of different variations to kind of sprinkle it in. Some of the short yardage stuff that they did when they had those 3rd and 4th downs, I thought was impressive. So a lot to like about what K-State's defense was able to do yesterday after the initial punches. Unfortunately, the KU defense still struggles enough that the offense was good enough to fight with. What did you make of the K-State offense yesterday? Because they had a pretty close to perfect game.
Yeah, I mean, I thought they threw the ball a lot in the first half and threw it pretty confidently. I think Will Howard was on pace to top like 400-ish yards, get around that mark. And then they only threw it 3 times in the second half because they didn't really have to. And like I said a little bit earlier, they wanted to establish the run and they wanted to just give it to Deuce. They felt like they were up and they could just run the clock. So I don't think Will Howard played poorly yesterday. And his numbers would say the same thing. Like, he still threw for over 200 yards. He had 2 touchdowns. His completion percentage probably could have been a little bit higher. He only completes 11 of 21, but his rating was still close to 170. So he still had a pretty good game.
Yeah.
Obviously, that fumble's tough. Those are tough ones when you're a quarterback. Like, they tell you all the time, keep 2 hands on the ball. Make sure you're protecting it when you're in the pocket and stepping up, because you're gonna have people spiking at it, swatting at it, all those different things. And those are tough. And I thought they ran the ball really well in the second half. I felt like they committed themselves more in the second half, Mason, to running the football than they did in the first half. Whereas in the first half, I thought they really tried to kind of attack KU through the air. because of because like I thought KU was really trying to stack the box and take away the run, given the struggles that they had last week. And give Will Howard credit. I thought he made a few good reads. I thought he made a few plays on broken opportunities. Obviously, the big touchdown pass to Sammy Wheeler is a good example of that. But you put all those things together, and I thought the offense did a pretty good day. I mean, they put up 47 points. Like, it felt like kind of like a tale of two halves almost. Like the first half, they threw the ball really effectively, and then the second half, when they tried to run the ball more, they had more success there.
And that was one of my concerns was the way this offense has gone was K-State has thrown the ball a lot more. It's looked really good. It's worked out for them. It's been great. I was hoping that they would be very committed to the run because we knew that that was one way that you could kind of expose Kansas. And early on, they were able to find ways to still make plays through the air. But I think once they go into the halftime break with a double-digit lead, the idea becomes, okay, we know we can still run against these guys, and let's go and try and salt this thing away, do it on the ground. And they were eventually able to do that. And, I mean, it also could have been that they made the conscious effort to say, let's do the hardest thing against this KU defense, which appears to be throwing the football. Let's do that first, get it out of the way. We still think we can hang. And then they'll think that we're still so pass heavy that we'll end up running the hell out of the football and surprising them there and just keep doing it and doing it. And that's exactly what K-State did. They had six rushing plays of 10 plus yards in yesterday's game, and 3 of those went for over 25 yards. One was in the first quarter, but the other 2 ended up coming in the fourth quarter, and K-State ultimately did a nice job with just continuously pounding it down KU's throat. So the offense still seems to be clicking with everything that happened. You mentioned the Will Howard fumble. Part of that's on Howard. Another part of that is just on the offensive line getting beat. It's something that they have struggled with all season long is pass protection. The only guy that's been able to hold up has been Cooper Beebe consistently. And they did run into a little bit of that problem again yesterday. But I said to you right before the fumble happened, it was that play prior where Will steps up and he hits Phillip Brooks kind of on the run. I said to you, like, Will Howard almost gets too comfortable back there sometimes. And sure enough, very next play, I mean, it wasn't like he was, back there forever and he should have known that it was coming. It happened a little bit quicker than that, but he at least should have felt the pressure. You would have hoped so. And again, it's a mistake that you can get away with against Kansas, but we already know that how things worked out the first time against TCU, each possession is going to be very, very valuable. So I look forward to seeing how he improves in that department because he has gotten better, it seems, with each week that we've seen him out there, and that's something that can kind of be a learning experience for him. But other than that, I thought he played well. The receivers were good again for the most part yesterday. There was maybe a drop or 2 that you would have liked to have had back. Phillip Brooks had one that was significant, and then Malik Knowles had one in the back of the end zone that would have been nice to grab. And based off the way he'd been playing this year, you would have maybe thought that he would have come down with it. He didn't. But they still made enough other plays throughout the game that you can't be overly critical of what they were able to do.
Yeah, I thought the offense, like, I don't know, I think we summarized it pretty well there. Like, they did what they wanted to do in each half, and I feel like they did it effectively. Like, I feel like their game plan changed before the game and then at halftime for what they wanted to do and what they wanted to attack.
Yeah, I mean, the way this whole thing played out, I think we've seen them grow and just, time and time again with everything that's gone on this year. And it's impressive the growth that has been made from the Tulane game to now. And a lot of that, like I mentioned, Colin Klein in 3 positives, 3 negatives, and the progression that he has seemingly made. He was great yesterday. He did what you needed to do, and he had everything dialed up just the way that you would want it. Like he blew me away with how it worked out. So I think he's feeling himself right now. Obviously, Chris Kleiman knows what he's doing. And the defense, I think, is still trying to put together the pieces of missing some key guys on that side of the ball, but they're doing just enough to kind of hold things together until they can get things meshed, and hopefully they can come out and have a hot start against TCU, who was able to, like you said, dismantle what was probably the best defense in the Big 12. I mean, I don't know exactly what the numbers would say to back that up. Maybe they do, maybe they don't. But eye test wise, it feels like that Iowa State defense, who had to put the entire team on their back all season long, has really stood the test against everybody in the league except for TCU, who just absolutely crushed them yesterday. Part of that was TCU was able to take advantage of bad offense, but also 62 points or whatever it was. That's still a pretty impressive number that they were able to put up.
Yeah, and we know the talent they have. I mean, Quentin Johnson is a potential. I saw him mocked in the top 10 this past week of the NFL draft. Like, that team is talented. There's a chance Max Duggan goes to New York for the Heisman ceremony if they take more than 2-3 guys. Like, that offense is good. That offense is very good. Sonny Dykes is known as a really good offensive, innovative coach, innovative mind, good play caller. And clearly everything he's done this season has kind of hit the right tune for the Horned Frogs because they just completed their first 12 regular season since 2010. The year they went down to Pasadena and won the Rose Bowl. And I think that was that the year they won the Rose Bowl? That's got to be the year they won the Rose Bowl, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I think so.
Okay. I feel like it's got to be. It should be because they beat Wisconsin in that Rose Bowl, and Wisconsin won the Big Ten in 2010, I think.
Yes.
You put all these things together, and I hate using the phrase and like the term team of destiny, but it almost feels like this TCU team is to a point, and they've overcome so much this year in terms of close games they probably should have lost on multiple different occasions. I mean, they were down to Oklahoma State in the second half. They were down 28-10 against K-State at one point. They were down against Baylor and really kind of got lucky. I know that they said they practice that play every single day, and I heard it's the first play they do every single day on their Thursday practice. Like, all those things are great, but like, it's almost like they've had a lot of things go their way a lot this year, where other teams maybe haven't all the time. Like, and that's just kind of the way the ball bounces every now and then. I mean, football's not a round ball; it bounces in different directions a lot. But I think this TCU team is good. Like, do I think they're great? Do I think they're good enough to win a national title? No. Like, I don't think they're good enough to do that. I don't think they're talented enough to do that. Like, I think you put them on a field with Georgia or Michigan or some of those other teams at the top of the sport this season, that they're not going to have a ton of success. But are they good enough to win the Big 12 in a week from Saturday? Absolutely. They're good enough to win the Big 12. We've seen them beat Kansas State. We've seen them overcome difficult circumstances against this K-State team. Granted, it was at home, but like, you put all those factors together, and I think each team probably feels pretty confident going into this matchup because of the personnel they have. Like, TCU has one of the best offenses in the Big 12 when you look at their passing numbers, and they're the fourth best rushing offense in the Big 12, and their rush defense is top half. Like, you put all these things together, and it's a matchup between two pretty good teams.
Yeah, one other thing that kind of comes to mind about TCU season and how this thing has worked out. Like you mentioned, they've had some circumstances that have played into it. They've been able to be the beneficiary, of, at least early on, we thought like they weren't having to deal with serious injuries, but then they did have key guys out and they were still able to play through that. So this team does know how to overcome some things. I just think the one thing that this is going to come down to for me is the K-State defense, and if they can kind of fix some of the early game problems that we've seen the last couple of weeks. Because if I hadn't seen yesterday's game, and just say that you tell me KU and K-State play to maybe that same score, and I don't have to watch how it plays out, I probably tell you, hey, I'm going with K-State because I think they win that game in Fort Worth if Will Howard doesn't have to miss 2 series. And when he goes out, K-State has the lead. And when he comes back in, they're trailing in the game. I would probably take K-State. But I am a little bit concerned right now about the defense and if they're going to be able to do enough early on. So, I mean, we've seen them play some good games. But that's really what this is going to come down to, because I think both offenses are going to be up to the challenge, both K-State's and TCU's. So we'll just have to kind of look and see how things end up going down there. Do you have any other thoughts from the Sunflower Showdown yesterday that you need to get out? Anything that you thought was notable after the game from Kleiman, the players, whoever, or move on to look at the rest of the league real quick, and then we'll hit on a couple of other topical things and then get out of here.
Yeah, let's hit the rest of the Big 12.
All right. Well, real quick, I want to give a shout out to first off, big round of applause to the Texas Longhorns on their strong third place finish this season in the Big 12. I know it was a long road for them, and they did a great job. I want seriously though, where would Texas be if they had just decided that like giving the ball to Bijan Robinson and Roshan Johnson was the best plan of attack on offense? Because, and I know you don't want to say anything bad about him because you love Quinn
I
Ewers.
will say bad things about him. He has not been good the last few weeks. I'll
No,
even
and
go further.
them putting the ball in his hands so often at different points this season is truly the reason why they are a 4-loss team right
Yeah.
now. Like,
No, I mean, I'll say this too, though. Like, Quinn has definitely struggled and he needs to be better. His deep ball accuracy has really struggled at times this season. His footwork is something that I've heard people say needs to be better. Like, I haven't watched it closely enough. I haven't been able to watch Texas a ton just because of travel and game times and all those different things, right? And I wasn't able to watch him at all against Baylor. I know he had a fumble that I think was recovered for a touchdown. Is that right?
yes, he did.
And I don't know how the play happened. So
Oh, and he had a bad intentional grounding in the end
that
zone for a
that one I
safety.
saw.
Yeah.
Like while he has struggled a lot this year, like I'm still betting on that talent to come through at some point next season from the pure standpoint of like I kind of view him as a true freshman this year. His whole situation was not handled well. The idea of
By him,
I'm not going
right?
to blame someone. For, what'd you say?
By him though, right? Like,
Yeah,
if
no, or him and his camp like all together. Like I'm not going to blame
I
someone
don't
for
give you a
going to
pass
Ohio State.
if you're the person that like screws your own self, then I'm not giving you a pass and be like, well, we got to give him
No,
whatever.
that's fair.
Like,
What I was just like,
if I get into a single car accident, I don't get a pass for being like, oh, he's still a good driver. He had that one thing that happened, like he mismanaged his driving situation. No, I screwed up. I'm a bad driver in that situation.
no, what I was gonna say is that like, yeah, like he / his camp kind of messed the whole situation up. With like, I don't think the idea of him enrolling early at Ohio State, just to take the bag of the NIL was maybe the greatest decision. But at the same time, like, if there's $1 million in front of me, like I'm gonna take it. I think most people would take it. And then I kind of just think it was like part of the plan all along for him to go to Ohio State at the time he did, and then transfer. And it was clearly the plan once CJ Stroud turned into the player that he is early in the season last year for Ohio State. It was like, well, I'm not going to be able to play next year. So like I kind of view him as a true freshman this year, and it's rare for true freshman quarterbacks to come in and have a ton of success. Like I think the play that we've seen out of people like Trevor Lawrence and Drake May over the last 5-6 years in college football maybe skews the opinion of what a true freshman quarterback is supposed to be. Like if Will Howard hadn't done what he has done this season, and Avery Johnson was coming in to be K-State starting quarterback next year, like I wouldn't expect him to be any better or any worse than Quinn was down at Texas this season. So like he obviously has areas he needs to improve, but at the same time, like there's been moments where he's flashed, and next season he's not going to have Bijan, he's not going to have Roshan, but that offensive line should take another step, assuming all those receivers come back that are eligible to come back.
Well,
Don't give me
have
the
you
social media bull.
have you seen the Xavier Worthy news?
Don't give, yeah. Remember when Keyshawn Booty did the same thing, and everyone thought he was going to transfer, and now he's still going to be a top 2-round draft pick. Yeah, don't give me it.
I'm just,
I'm not the social media speculation crap person. It's
I
just
think
not
you
what
should.
I
I
am.
think you should upgrade teams and enter the portal. A wise person in the Rivals Network once said that. So just want that to be put out there.
Should you go fight on?
Yeah, I mean, it
I
seems.
mean, they're gonna have to replace one star receiver.
Yeah, exactly. And since you think that Caleb Williams could win the Heisman again next year after
I
he wins it
do.
this year,
I do.
I agree. I mean, but he's going to need another stud receiver. So you might
Right
as
on.
well.
Maybe we'll get Dominic Levet. He just left Mizzou, or is
Yeah.
going to be leaving Mizzou.
Um.
But
Look,
yeah, like Texas has room to improve, and I'll go out on a limb here,
oh
Mason.
boy.
I'm gonna pick Texas to win the league in 2023.
All
I'll
right.
do it.
All right. Alec Bussey still does not have his pulse on the Big 12.
Do you want to follow up? Do you want to make a bet on it?
I mean, what would we bet on this? Like, Texas is going to Texas. I'm not a Steve
What's a food
Sarkisian
you don't
believer.
like?
I'm not a believer in Quinn Martell the third.
What's a food you don't like?
I don't know. I mean, there's probably a lot that I could throw out there that I don't like. I don't know. We'll figure something out. We've got a long way to go. We can still throw a Texas bet out there.
We can revisit after
I
the
don't.
transfer portal.
I think if like Texas had Bijan coming back and the same like running attack, I could see it because then maybe they know what they have to do. But they're not going to have that. You're going to have to show me somebody that can replace those guys. And what Arch Manning's playing by game 5 next year?
No, not a chance.
Just saying. Maybe you've seen this. We'll move on real quick. Do you know who the team that finished in 4th place all by themselves in the Big 12 was this year? As you're typing on your computer right now, cheater.
No, I was pulling up scores of the games because we talked about them. Well, let's see. TCU got first. Well, kind of.
No, they just flat out got first.
Well, kind of.
Regular season first, yes.
K-State got second. Texas got third.
Mm-hmm.
It wouldn't be Baylor.
No, not Baylor.
It can't be Oklahoma.
No, Oklahoma, one of 3 schools that finished 3-6 in conference play this year.
Yeah, it can't be Iowa. So how many schools are it? It can't be TCU. It can't be K-State. It can't be Texas. It can't be Baylor. It can't be Oklahoma. It can't be Iowa State. It can't be West Virginia. So that leaves me with Kansas, and it's not Kansas.
Correct. So you got
they
2
only
schools.
won 2 Big 12 games. So that leaves me with Texas Tech and Oklahoma State. And because Oklahoma State lost yesterday and lost to Texas Tech, that means Texas Tech got 4th place.
That is true. Texas Tech, solo 4th place finish for Joey McGuire. 5-4. So only 4 teams finished with a winning conference record this year.
Look at the process of elimination.
Impressive. To be fair, in most years, there's only like 4 teams that finish above 500 in the Big 12, unless you have like a big dog pile in the middle. But I thought that was fascinating. I mean, I realized Tech put together a string of wins down the stretch here. But they did a nice job. They won their last 3 games, got themselves in a good position. So shout out to Texas Tech and what they might have moving forward. Other Big 12 teams, Oklahoma State, a disappointing finish. Yesterday, Spencer Sanders played the entire game against Oklahoma, and then in his last game as a Cowboy, doesn't playing this thing. But just kind of odd to see. Oklahoma, just what a collapse by them yesterday in Lubbock in a really fun game.
For me to rank them 8th this week?
Yeah, I mean that's fine, but just remember that they beat Kansas. So
just remember where I had them.
Yeah, I'm just saying. Just remember this circumstance and status of everything else that it ended up going down.
7th or 8th is fair, right?
Yeah, probably fair. Oh, by the way, you need to get those to me. And then Kansas and West Virginia, they tie towards the bottom with Oklahoma, and then Iowa State 1-8. That's tough when you've got the messiah of college football, Matt Campbell, as your head coach, and in like year 5 or 6 there, he ends up going 1-8 in conference play. So hats off to the Clones.
Speaking of the messiah, just looking at a list of, we'll just transition to what is the news of the day in college football.
That would be Cincinnati, future Big 12 team, Cincinnati losing their head coach, Luke Fickell, to Wisconsin.
That's brutal. Like, that's just a real gut punch if you're Cincinnati or a Cincinnati fan. Like, you probably feel like I feel like Cincinnati fans had to know at some point he wasn't going to be their head coach because he was going to leave for someone. But to then lose him to Wisconsin, like, Wisconsin's a better program. They've won a lot more. It's in a conference that's going to be able to pay him more money. All those things kind of considered, like, it's a better job and it's a better opportunity. But to lose him to Wisconsin when you held him off from other Big Ten jobs and overtures from other programs that are better jobs, like Michigan State was really interested in him. I know Notre Dame was interested in him. In my time covering Illinois, I mean, like, after Illinois fired Lovie Smith, like, they contacted him, I believe, at least 2-3 times to see if he was interested. And he said no. And, like, obviously Illinois is not a very good job in terms of the success that's been had there in the last 20, 30 years. But, like, to lose him to Wisconsin is tough after you kept him from other programs that were higher profile. But just looking at a quick list of people on a hot board, Matt Campbell's name is included. Shocker. I feel like he's been included on every single hot board for every
Here's
available
the
job
thing,
ever in the last 3
does
years.
it make sense with Cincinnati coming to the Big 12? Is that a better job than Iowa State? Like with the
Yeah,
groundwork that Matt Campbell has already done there, would you rather be at Cincinnati than Iowa State? I
I
mean,
would.
and
Cincinnati's won.
like he was at Toledo beforehand, so he has the
Yeah, I mean,
Ohio
like, he
stuff
has
in his
ties out
background.
there. He definitely has ties out there, and I mean, I don't want I hope this doesn't come off as me, like, saying the Cincinnati job isn't a good job, but, like, I feel like a lot of people have won there in the last 20 years. I mean, like, Brian Kelly was incredibly successful there. Luke Fickell was successful there. They had someone in between them too.
Tommy Tuberville was there.
Yeah, like, they've had pretty successful coaches there over time. I don't think Tuberville was overly successful at Cincinnati, but, um, that means there's an institution there to win games, and that obviously hasn't been there throughout history at Iowa State. And I think Matt Campbell and I think Iowa State fans and just like people around that program are probably starting to understand like it's hard to maintain and build sustained success, especially at a program like Iowa State, which has had none really throughout their entire history. But his name's included on every coaching search,
You would be
on every single coaching search.
so you would be surprised. Tommy Tuberville, he went 29-22 while he was there. Had a winning record in conference play. It wasn't terrible. The other names on here that I've forgotten because let me tell you, I am I when Cincinnati announced they were coming to the Big 12, I had to fight my radio co-host on this pretty hard, like to explain like why Cincinnati actually made sense and like Cincinnati will be consistent in football. They always have been. They have always done a great job of making hires. So they hired in 2004 Mark D'Antonio.
Wow, that's
He
good.
only went 18-17 while he was there, but that was coming off of a lot of losing for Cincinnati. He obviously ends up getting the Michigan State job and doing great things there. '06 they hire Brian Kelly. Obviously, Brian Kelly does well enough to move on. Kelly won 3 straight Big East Coaches of the Year, goes to Notre Dame, takes him to the national championship and playoff a few times. And then they hired Butch Jones, who like now we can all laugh at Butch, but Butch Jones got a bigger job after Cincinnati, and things ultimately ended up working out, for at least a little bit of time. And then it was a disaster. Then it was Tuberville, and then he left him because he wanted to go be a politician. And then after that, they hired Luke Fickell. And I mean, like Fickell had hype and praise around him, but also it was coming off of him coach for a year at Ohio State, and it was not a good season for Ohio
Well,
State.
that was like
And
4 or 5 years after though.
yeah, I understand that. Like
Okay.
but I'm
Okay.
saying
I
like
was just making sure that
he
was
had the
clear.
experience. He had the experience of that, and to where like that one season shouldn't have defined Luke Fickell, and it obviously didn't. But it very easily could have been a reason for Cincinnati to have some pause and be like, do we really think this guy can be a head coach? They went with it, so they know what they're doing there. And I fully anticipate that they probably make another really nice hire. So we'll see what happens, but it does suck for Cincinnati, and it definitely hurts for the competitiveness of the Big 12 because you would imagine that Cincinnati, depending on who they end up getting, takes a little bit of a drop off for a little bit to get things built back up into the image of the new coach. But it is going to make for a fascinating coaching search if a guy like Matt Campbell really is in the mix for the Cincinnati job, and he would seriously consider leaving Iowa State for that.
Just some other names that I'm looking at on this list, and it's actually from Cincinnati's 24/7 site. Dave Clawson, head coach at Wake Forest.
Mm-hmm.
He could coach. I don't know how. I mean, that's probably a better job. I feel like he's happy there. Buffalo's head coach Mo Lindquist. I don't know much about him. Prime time. I'm all over prime time.
I
Getting a
feel like everybody's
prime
going to
time
have him
job.
on there, but like, is he really going to take some of these jobs he's been thrown out for?
You
Like,
know what job I feel like that's available that kind of makes sense for him? South Florida.
yes, that's a good call. It's a good
Like
call.
I thought he would have fit really well at our boy Gabe's Arizona State.
Well,
And
they
I
kind
think
of
the
already
Kenny
tried
Dillingham
the
hire is
former.
great.
They've already tried the former NFL star that like likes to talk it up with the media, and that got him into some hot water. So,
Well, but
although Deion's a
Dion,
lot cooler than Herm, so I
I mean,
get that.
Dion's prime time, baby. Look good, feel good, play good, pay good, live good, die good. Is that how he ends it?
What? I don't know. I'm not
You don't know
sure.
that quote?
No, I'm not an aficionado when it comes to Deion Sanders.
I like Deion Sanders. I might
I mean,
watch
I
Deion double
have
play
no
tonight.
have no issues, but I also whatever. I think it's all kind of overblown at this point.
Troy's head coach, John Summerall, don't know much about him. Bill O'Brien, offensive coordinator at Bama. I feel like the way Alabama's offense has been run into the ground this season in particular is probably going to keep him off of some people's names. Tom Herman, kind of an interesting one. This is an interesting one, and I love this guy. Brian Hartline, he's a passing game coordinator at Ohio State. He is an incredible recruiter, and I read a quote from Chris Vanini of The Athletic that the Cincinnati athletic director is really looking for someone who has good recruiting prowess. So maybe Brian Hartline leaves his alma mater. Alex Golesh, the offensive coordinator at Tennessee, obviously they had a pretty explosive offense. And then some other interesting names on here that are just coordinators or whatever. But I'm very interested to see like what Cincinnati does because they can clearly sell like we've got a good recruiting territory. We just made it to playoff, but like how much of that was really done because of Luke Fickell, you know?
Yeah, we'll have to watch and see how this all ends up playing out. That'll do it for us. We'll have more coverage coming up, obviously throughout the week. A lot to get to and focus on. Also, a good reminder that if you want to sign up for EMA Online, if you're not already, just $22 right now when you use the code Rivals22. Get a full year for $22 for a little special for everybody right now. Makes the most sense. Great time of year for this to happen. K-State getting ready to play in the Big 12 championship. K-State basketball 6-0 with their big road trip to Big East foe Butler coming up on Wednesday. Alec will be in Hinkle Fieldhouse and see how the second road test goes for the Wildcats this season against a power opponent in Butler. Even though, they're not Power 5, but the Big East deserves its respect in basketball, even though it may suck this year, actually, outside of Creighton.
Hey, UConn's good.
UConn is maybe okay. I know what they're playing Iowa State as we're recording this or getting ready to tonight for the Phil Knight.
Sonogo is really good. They've got some decent guard play. Like UConn's look good. You know who hasn't looked good?
Villanova.
Well, yeah, they haven't. I was going to go North Carolina, but
oh yeah, well they're not in the Big East though, so not worried about
they're on
ACC
the East,
basketball. They are. So we'll have plenty of other stuff coming. Then obviously full preview of the Big 12 championship game and thoughts on that in the midweek as we get set for K-State and TCU in the Big 12 title game. The Cats have done it. They put together a full game. They finished with all the pressure on them. The one thing, and we can dive into this more later in the week when we talk about it, but something that I think benefits K-State is that really the entire season and every game they've played, they have been the team that everybody is chasing and everybody is trying to give their best shot at. Really, the last game that K-State played as, in my eyes, what would be like the underdog, truly, where they had nothing to lose in the game, would be that game at Oklahoma, fourth game of the season. Like, Oklahoma was a top 5, top 10 team at that point in time. We thought they were still good, and K-State's coming off that loss to Tulane. The Cats had nothing to lose in that game. Whereas once they won that, and each week that came after that, they were the team that was getting chased by everybody. Everybody wanted to give them their best chance. Even that game at TCU, I mean, K-State had one more win at the time in conference play than the Horned Frogs. People still weren't sure on TCU, and the Cats got up early. And so they have gone through this where everybody has wanted to get K-State for a specific reason or another. They were able to make it through that stretch of games, and now they get to go and play a game against TCU where the Cats have 0 to lose. They're a lock for the Sugar Bowl at this point. They are going out there. TCU's unbeaten. They're the ones with all the pressure playing for a playoff spot. That's going to be for me to see is how we see the looseness of each team's loose in a good way. And so we'll dive into that a little bit deeper as everything moves on. Do you want to divulge your pick yet for the Big 12 title game?
I don't, because I don't have one made, but I do want to divulge how excited I am to likely get a chance to ask Nick Saban a question in New Orleans.
Yeah,
maybe
LSU,
what we should make a bet on? We should make a bet here, and then before the Sugar Bowl, and the loser has to purposefully ask Nick Saban a really stupid question, like a next level.
Hang on, real quick. I don't remember. Do I call him Nick or Coach Saban?
I think Dion was the one who got upset about that, wasn't he?
No, somebody.
No, it was a reporter. Well, it was a reporter who said you're not going to call Nick Saban Nick.
Yeah, and then there's elements of him calling him Nick. Okay, I'm going to call him Nick. I'm going to be, hey, Nick, the McRib, yes or no? How you feel about it? And we'll go from there.
See, but like, I feel like he'd laugh at that. Like, you got to ask him a really stupid football question.
I don't know about that. I don't.
This might be funny. This might be a great bet. This might be a great
We'll
bet.
see.
But
We'll
I don't
have
know
to
if I
figure
want
it
to
out.
make this bet. Like, I don't want Nick Saban to humiliate me. Like, you know how when reporters ask really stupid questions and then they get blown up by whatever the subject is?
Here's the thing, though. If you intentionally, like, if you're doing it to intentionally, like, get a rise out of somebody and, like, you know that it's a joke, like, it's a lot different than if you're trying to be serious and you ask a question that's a joke. Like, you and I, in separate settings before, have sat in, media sessions where somebody asks a question and you just, like, cringe, and you know that, like, the person they're asking the question to are going to be like really confused. Like, here's a perfect example. And this wasn't like a negative way or whatever.
Just
and
being said, like,
honestly, it ended up being
I'm guilty of asking stupid questions at some points in my past for sure. Like,
it ended up being funnier that this was the answer. But like, take my boy Mitch Fortner, for example, after Coach Tang's first game at K-State. And he asked him about, like, you took a little bit longer to get out than the rest of the team before the game. Like, were you just taking a moment for yourself and everything? And Jerome Tang just kind of looks at him and pauses, and he, like, smiles, and he, like, goes, I had to go to the bathroom. Like, that's one of those things where,
like, that's actually a good question.
No, it is. But like, the response and everything with it, like, I think it could be skewed depending on the circumstance on how it goes. So I think as long as
what
you
would we have
that
to
you're
ask
in on
Nick
it.
Saban to get him genuinely mad if K-State and Bama played in the Sugar Bowl? Like, what would we have to ask him? Something about him taking another job with, like,
Nick, is Will Howard the best quarterback you've seen?
No, see, because that's like, no, it'd have to be something like.
Hey, look, I can't craft.
I can't quit asking.
Well, yeah, you're trying to.
Can we get one of those out of him?
I don't think you can craft a stupid enough question for Saban, like, to where he will have that answer. I think it has to be like what some would think is a serious and fair question, but like, you have to know him to know that he'll irrationally lash out. But we'll discuss it when the timing comes up. Final note: College game day.
Here's one. Okay. Coach Saban, are you afraid that Deuce Vaughn is going to run through your ass like shit through a tin horn? And just see what he says.
I'm sure he would have some kind of response.
Do you think he would get the reference?
I don't know. I couldn't tell you if he could or not.
I think he would.
What? That's from The Blind Side, right? That's what?
No, that's from him.
Oh, I don't know. You were talking about The Blind Side yesterday.
One year they played Georgia
wasn't he?
Southern.
He makes an appearance there. He's one of the coaches that shows up.
He is, and he is the coach at LSU in that movie, actually. But there was one year they played Georgia Southern, and they gave up like 230 or like 300 rushing yards or something absurd.
Mm-hmm.
And it was their worst game that the defense had played all year, and ironically, it was against Georgia Southern. And he was like, they ran through our ass like shit through a tin horn, man, and we could not stop them. I'll find the video of it and send it to you.
All right. Well, we've reached the part of the show where Alec has gotten vulgar, and he's talking about too much about Nick Saban, Alabama, who I do not care about at this point in time because my sole focus is on TCU right now. So I'm going game by game. So, and a lot of people doubted that we would get to the end of this podcast today. But there were two guys that believed we would get there, and that was you and I.
Shut up.
Alec said before we went into Chris Kleiman's press conference last night, he's like, he's going to make some comment about how nobody believed in these guys. Meanwhile, they were like the trendy pick to win the Big 12 this year. And sure enough, he got to it quicker than I thought. I knew he would. And like, I get it to some extent where he's coming from. And also every coach says it. Everybody was out on this team after they lost to Tulane, but it is also true that, yes, most people at the start of the season said, hey, K-State, watch out. They could do something special. So it is what it is. College game day will be in Arlington if you're interested in that. So they will be down there getting ready for Frogs and Cats. We'll see if Lee Corso is true to his word because he did say he was picking TCU to lose next weekend. this past weekend on College Game Day. So it seems likely that Lee Corso will put on the Willie Head on Saturday in Arlington, but we'll have to see how that all plays out. There will be more details on that. And everything else you need throughout the week you can find over on EMA Online. Basketball coverage this week, football lead up. We'll also have some recruiting updates with some guys. Tomorrow, which would be Monday, you'll be able to find a piece that has reaction from a bunch of football recruits and what they thought of K-State's performance against Kansas and securing their spot in the Big 12 championship. Obviously, the little sneak peek would be a lot of guys that are very impressed and excited to see K-State play for a Big 12 title. So that'll do it for us. We'll be back in the middle of the week to get set for kickoff of the Cats and Frogs, part 2 this year for the Big 12 championship. Follow along with us over at EMA Online through Rivals, and that'll do it for Alec and I.